Hi, I'm Johnny Guyton, HR Director with Duro Electric, and today we'll be training you on reasonable suspicion. During today's course, you'll learn to identify various signs and cues to recognize when one of your employees might be under the influence. During today's course, you'll learn to tell the various signs, what actions to take, and when it's time to get safety or HR involved for next steps. So why are we conducting today's training? Well, as a supervisor, you have the responsibility of providing both a safe and productive work environment. This includes protecting your employees from themselves if they happen to show up and be under the impairment of some type of drug or alcohol. But during the course of this training, I do want you to know what is not your responsibility. One, it's not your responsibility to diagnose a drug or alcohol problem. Two, it's not your responsibility to have all the answers. Three, it's not your responsibility to provide counseling to these employees. And four, it's not your responsibility to be a police officer. During the course of this training, we're going to help you understand what are your responsibilities, but really important to know what you're not supposed to do as well. Through this training course, you're going to learn how to properly communicate company policy to employees in relation to drugs and alcohol. You'll learn how to properly work through the investigation process and learn how to safeguard the employee's confidential information as we work through these processes. So do these things actually happen out there in the field, and is this important for us to do a training on? Yes, unfortunately these things do happen in the field. Brief story, but last year in 2019, we had one of our own employees offer a Duro supervisor cocaine on a job site. The supervisor took the appropriate response and got in contact with both myself as well as Troy, our safety manager, and we handled the situation. But these things do happen, maybe a bit more frequently than we're aware of. And so it is important for us to be aware of the signs and trends that might happen so we can appropriately respond in case these things do occur. So it's important to recognize that any situation in the field related to drugs or alcohol is a crisis situation. But it's also important to recognize the difference between a crisis situation and a performance or behavior problem. So crisis situations are things such as the following: possession of drugs or alcohol on the job site, erratic or dangerous behavior, threatening behavior, obvious impairment, or any type of illegal activity. When working with a crisis situation, here are some questions that you should ask and details that you should notate. What did you see exactly? Is there the appearance of an illegal activity, a policy violation, or just unusual behavior? Who was involved? Are there any witnesses? What is the danger or threat level? Does this require law enforcement, or is it time to call safety and HR? On-the-job indicators of impairment. Signs of various impairment can be observed by appropriate observation of an employee's body. There are various items that you can look for, and we're going to cover those from head to toe. Starting from the top at the head, eye contact or lack thereof eye contact can be an indicator of impairment. If someone is staring blankly or too focused, that could be a sign of impairment, or too nervous to provide proper eye contact could be another sign of impairment. Redness of the eyes, dilated pupils, slurred speech, incoherent messaging or rambling, odor of the breath, things such as smelling of alcohol or marijuana, excessive sweating, excessive dry mouth, excessively watery eyes, or flush or pale face. Signs of impairment from the body can include staggering, being overly fidgety, having the shakes, again odor, again things such as smelling of alcohol, beer, or marijuana, running into objects, dizziness or fainting, rapid breathing or hyperventilating, nausea or vomiting, or being overly excited and having excessive energy. Also look for signs of impairment through behaviors, things such as verbal or physical abusiveness, extreme irritation, confusion, unusual withdrawal, depression, fearfulness, or unresponsiveness. Now, since you recognize that there may be a potential impairment with a member of your team, What are your next steps? Well, first thing you should do is, if you have another leader on site, go ahead and grab that additional leader and see if they find the same observations that you have found with that employee. If they don't, then go ahead and continue to monitor that employee throughout the day and see if there's any behaviors that warrant additional investigation. So if the second leader that you've grabbed also sees the same signs of impairment that you yourself have witnessed, your next steps will be to assess the severity of the situation. Is there any type of immediate threat, danger, illegal activity, or possession of illegal substances on the job site? If so, your next steps will be to call the local authorities and then call the safety and HR teams. If this is purely an impairment situation and there is no immediate threat, then just call the safety or HR teams. Do not call the local authorities, and we will manage through the situation. When you connect with safety or HR in regards to your impaired employee, it'll be important for you to provide us with the details that you've seen and witnessed so that we can provide you with proper guidance on next steps. Depending upon the situation, we'll either send a specialist to your site that can perform a drug test there in person, or we'll direct you to the nearest facility for drug testing. Do not let the employee drive themselves for drug testing purposes. So what is the company policy regarding reasonable suspicion testing so you can properly communicate it to your employees? The company policy states that if any employee is observed with a potential impairment, that reasonable suspicion drug testing or alcohol testing must take place immediately. If the employee happens to refuse to submit to drug or alcohol testing, company policy does state that their employment with the organization ends immediately. After connecting with safety and HR, you'll need to fill out the reasonable suspicion testing form. That will be available on SharePoint. On this form, you'll indicate what behaviors you saw that led you to sitting this employee for reasonable testing, and then you'll also have a space where you can notate additional observations in free writing form. Please complete this form as soon as possible and send it over to our safety manager, Troy Bridges. Bear in mind that in the state of Colorado, marijuana is a perfectly legal and acceptable drug to use for recreational or medical purposes. However, since we are an OFCCP regulated organization at our parent company level, use of marijuana is strictly prohibited at Duro Electric. Use of marijuana products, and if they're found in your system, will result in immediate termination. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to go through this brief training course regarding reasonable suspicion testing. Biggest thing is we're all in this together. If you need any assistance, please reach out to either myself or Troy Bridges at any point in time for assistance, and we will help you through this process. This is definitely a tough process to go through, and I hope that you all don't have to face it during your careers. But in the case that you do, just know that we're here to support you with additional guidance and training.